Could do the same thing. I doubt it. In the bottom right of Death Aura for game 1, he is the red Protoss BRG's ShowTimE. In the top left is the blue Protoss. You have Team Liquid's Harstem. What would the Team Liquid Star League be without Team Liquid players? Of course, at least one's already invited. Clem's already invited, but you'd expect a couple of them, of more Team Liquid players to qualify. Mana, Harstem, just being the standouts there, but Euthermal, you'd think so as well. Give you an overview of who already is invited, as we had just gateways going down, so I'm not missing anything important. We got one Protoss player invited, Zest. Then for Terrans, Clem, Maru, Special, TY, and Zerg, Raynor, Rogue, and Serral. So, a couple of the best, I mean, literally the best European Protoss players aren't here in the qualifier because they were invited and they accepted the invitations, as they should. And then the rest of the players will be filled up thanks to these qualifiers. There already was one, believe it or not. There was the Korean qualifier earlier today, technically, even in America. It was like 10 hours ago, 11 hours ago, where Parting, Dream, Armani, and Ragnarok were able to qualify. And those are not very long qualifiers, by the way. So I expect whoever signed up for the Korean qualifiers by the end of the third Korean qualifier, there are 3 of them, will probably recognize, like, no one is going to be left out, I think, of the Korean scene. Like, there's 12 spots for the Koreans, and the 13th, 14th, 15th one in invites, right? But I think we'll see everyone we're used to seeing. I guess GSL is around a 24, so not quite everyone we're used to seeing, but you get what I'm putting down, right? The point is, a lot of the Koreans you would expect are actually going to be able to make it through. And I will be casting some of those Korean qualifiers later on. But we have something more important to talk about. Harstem going for a proxy robo is really committing here. Big committal. Big bada boom. Not just a little bit of like a, ooh, I'm going to get a couple probes thanks to a Stargate. Nope. One base committal. ShowTime's looking around for it. He knows the pylon is missing. He wants to know what it is. Eventually, this probe might go ahead and scout the Nexus and be like, oh shit, there's nothing there. But by then, it might already be too late. So he really just wants to actually find the structures. As you can see, ShowTime might have already looked towards here, where there's commonly... There he goes. So now he's fully scouted here, where there's commonly going to be a building, and then they, like, use the hop over pylon to warp in. But in this case, Harstem kind of used, like, ShowTime's own rocks, like, in a way that's kind of how Death Aura gets divvied up. But, oh, there we go. There we go. Stalker's going to try and skedaddle real fast to the acceleration zone. But it is kind of a late acknowledgement of what type of proxy this was. So I'm not sure ShowTime's going to have it in him to defend. Obviously, no Nexus is going to be down. No shield battery is going to be up. So he's trying to build shield batteries and backup pylons while he can. He was, fortunately enough, going for 2 sentries beyond these 4 stalkers that will help him block out the ramp. And that's actually pretty damn good. It's very, very helpful. He was already getting those sentries. And now he can warp in whenever he wants, a 3rd sentry, in fact. Now, this does mean if he has so much gas for sentries, he must not have a very fast robo, and you'd be right about that. His robo only about 75-80% done. But the 4 stalkers that were patrolling around the map to look for the robo are actually going to break through here. No cancel for Harstem either, so maybe one less unit's going to be able to warp in. So only literally 1 stalker warped in. There's a sentry, barely fit that in. The sentry's going to get taken out instantly. Shield battery will finish up. A recall has to be used. The shield battery won't help that 1 stalker. And ShowTime's 4 stalker hit squad is fantastic. I mean, not only that, Harstem had to wait for his warp prism to even get up on the damn high ground anyways, thanks to all the sentries that were built, and so far, so good for our red Protoss. But do keep in mind, this is one of those awkward situations in PvP where potentially Harstem could have macroed this one out. I don't think it is anymore. Had to be swapped the entire time. That's what's been confusing me. I don't think he can anymore. If he had immediately identified, like, upon the sentry force fielding him out, Like, oh, this isn't gonna work. Maybe I can try and slip in a macro game, kind of get ahead of him on the Nexus timing. Maybe. Now that he's committed so much, now that he's taken some damage, now that he's pulled back entirely, so no harassment even coming down, Harstem's gonna have a very difficult time actually going for this Nexus, which he's gonna try and do, but that is one of those awkward things that could happen in a PvP. You're like, aha, I defended, you're all in. And then the other person goes, but aha, you are now stuck in your base. Like, it's kind of silly, but it happens. It used to happen, actually, when this was the go-to build, but ShowTimE knows that this might be happening. He's going to also add on his own Nexus and not over-defend. In fact, he did actually scout the Nexus, so there you go. Also was able to injure their Warp Prism just a little bit, but could be important in the future. Immortal gets popped forward thanks to the force fields, but I guess ditto for ShowTimE's force fields. There's a Warp Prism for both sides, though, so no one's force fields really adding a lot. Everyone's Immortals hardened shields get popped, and then everyone just picks up and runs back home. So there you have it. ShowTimE still finds himself ahead in workers as he's been this entire game, really. You can see that in the economy. More harassment or attempted harassment. Harstem's gonna do what he can to find anything. And killing a pylon is, you know, pretty good. And here come the choices. So Nexus finishes a little bit faster for Harstem, giving him just a couple more probes with the production. Just for a hot second there, and he's gonna go into a faster Twilight Council, so both of them moving and grooving on into Blink Stalkers, I would assume. Don't think this Warp Prism is really meant to do very much. Sometimes, especially in the earlier parts of the game, you're like, oh, what if it's a distraction? What if they're actually going to try and hit me here? But now that his shield battery is done, it's not really going to be a concern. And I can guarantee that ShowTimE had his finger on the trigger of the force field in case it was some type of a hot gotcha moment. That Warp Prism had nothing in it. Haha. No. Harstem is just trying to keep tabs on his opponent, get some harassment done while also being perhaps a little bit greedier in some senses. Maybe a chrono here, a chrono there, different than ShowTimE. But ShowTimE is also getting a little more confident. He moves out, clears up the robo on the pylon. Not gonna go for his own harassment. You could argue he might have been able to get this pylon, you know, a little razzle-dazzle over here on this side of the ledge, but not gonna bother with it. And they both go into Blink. Harstem has been chronoing his, as well as having a slightly faster Twilight Council to begin with. Whereas perhaps ShowTimE chronoing, oh, both Twilight Council and Forge, there you go. Both fully saturated on their two bases, neither one with fourth gas quite yet, and things have evened up to an extent, to enough of an extent that this game goes on, right? You know, you'd think if you heard Harstem tried to through a proxy robo attack ShowTimE and it didn't work, you'd be like, oh, okay, so he's screwed, right? Well, that's not how the PvP goes. Not when ShowTimE held on one base. If ShowTimE had held on a natural Nexus with the help of a shield battery overcharge, well then yes, Harstem really would be screwed then, wouldn't he? But it wasn't that. So as the third Nexus comes down fairly quickly, ShowTimE is going to just transfer over a lot of the extra probes. It's probably not going to take that much of a delay in his probe production even. You'll see, like, you know, if you're going to be stuck on a certain number of bases, not really a reason to add on more workers, right? So you'll see a big gap in the worker production. But in this case, ShowTimE gets one down so confidently, he just continues building probes. It's already almost done. Harstem is preparing for some aggression. He's got 3 Immortals, a handful of Sentries, lots of Stalkers, and of course they both still have Warp Prisms. But he is also getting his third Nexus and really not that far behind ShowTimE. So I think he's looking for opportunities, looking for pushing forward a couple of units with his force fields, out-microing his opponent if he possibly can. ShowTimE's actually the one with a higher army supply and a faster +1, so it's like it really wouldn't have done very much for Harstem. And then Harstem is forced to withdraw anyways. He's recalling against a triple adept hit squad, which is going to get only 3 probes. It's really not that scary, but you know, with his pressure on the front lines, doomed to fail, doomed to do nothing, really. I mean, why not just recall? And now we move on to the next stage of PvP, which for some people is absolutely still the Disruptor. And for some other people, who needs Disruptors? ShowTime, I'm gonna give him a couple, maybe another minute before I'm like, okay, definitely not Robotics Bay, but he could be going for just the Mass Gateway style, absolutely. Harstem, clearly with not just a Robotics Bay, but also a Dark Templar, is really heading into that typical late game PvP that we've become very familiar with in the past year. They both got charged on the same time, no differences there. Mostly going to be used for harassment, but occasionally can be, you know, part of the fight. Double robo for Harstem as well. And another 30 seconds maybe for ShowTime to slap down a robo, maybe behind this push before I confirm 100% it is Mass Gateway. But I'm already feeling the Mass Gateway style for ShowTime. He has divvied up his army 50-50, looking to pressure two different sides or get a quick bop on a fifth Nexus. Oh, no. Ah, man, I should have waited the entire 30 seconds. Shit. Someone time that. Was that 60 seconds from when I said I'd give ShowTime that long to get a Robotics Bay? Gosh darn it. Anyways, so ShowTime is not going to just go Mass Gateway. He is throwing down his own Robotics Bay and Robo. So he's going to be a bit behind on that production, but he certainly has invested more into the Gateway army. So he still has 30 more supply than his opponents. More malleable army type, I guess. You can really... It's not just about looking for the Disruptor pop-offs. It's about splitting up his army. It's about finding awkward opportunities with Zealots to envelop a Disruptor that's off to the side thinking it can defend by itself. And they say there's a little more complexity even with ShowTime's army, even though it is Mass Gateway units. If ShowTime is going to play into this late game PvP, I expect them to go for a Dark Shrine soon as well. But I was watching a stream yesterday where he was going over his games versus Maru and the Asus ROG. Oh, not that thought actually. Big attack on the left side, finding those awkwardly placed units. You know, Harstem knew this was going to happen, or it could happen. Warped in some units, ends up not being enough. Not against the might of Zealots and Immortals, but it looks like no Observer came along for the party. Oh no, it did, but still, not enough units for ShowTime to combat the full fighting force of Harstem, plus some DTs warped in and he couldn't focus fire down. Makes sense that he backs away. And ShowTime is just going to look for an opportunity to the right, doesn't find it. Alright, there you go. So anyways, I was watching ShowTime's stream yesterday, and he went over a game where he specifically just heavily criticized his Dark Templar usage. He was like, oh, I can't believe it, these Dark Templar were terrible. At first he was like, oh, they weren't great, and then at the end of the game he was like, oh no, these are terrible, oh my god. So he might be a little hesitant to use Dark Shrine, or a little more reserved on the Dark Shrine timing. I do think I'm like really not a fan of the 3-base Dark Shrine in macro PvPs, right? Like occasionally they do work. Don't get me wrong. There's a couple of pretty famous examples of them working very well, but most of the time I'm like, if you're gonna go for a Dark Templar, or Dark Shrine in a macro PvP, you might as well wait. Because basically on 3 bases, Protoss players get static defense, so you need more than 1 or 2 DTs to actually crack those bases. So if that's the case, why not just wait until you have the ability to make those 6, 7, 8 DTs with DT Blink, you know? That's my perspective on things anyways. So I think Harstem actually had the correct timing. I liked his timing, but ShowTime's going to catch up eventually anyways. It's such a stalemate in PvP because it really is quite difficult to crack someone who's going to have 3, 4, 5, 6 Disruptors, plus shield batteries and the chokes of Death Aura, you know. 5th base might be where it gets a little more interesting. ShowTime does take a faster 5th base, which just makes sense. He's been in more control of his game. Not only is he going into his own Disruptors and his own Dark Shrine, but he is also adding on a much quicker Stargate to prepare the transition into either Carriers or Tempests. So it's kind of a funny dynamic where Tempests are king in PvP, to an extent. Like, they're I don't know if I have enough time to explain the dynamic, so I'm gonna hold off. PvP is a wild ride. At any moment, suddenly something very important could happen, thanks to Disruptors. But anyway, so if you can get away with Carriers, then they are fantastic, right? Tempests they're slow shooting, they're really great at taking down one big thing as opposed to many little things, which is what most of these armies consist of right now, many Stalkers. But when you do go into fully fledged, like late game PvP, and you're talking about Stargate to Stargate action, then the Tempests are going to be able to take out the carriers, because the carriers can't quite catch up to them. But only if you have enough Tempests. And again, not quite enough time to explain that dynamic. DT's actually jumping aggressively on top of the Disruptors, takes out a lot of them, but then one Disruptor from ShowTimE takes out a ton of units of Harstems. And then he actually counters a little bit, takes out a good chunk of the Zealots, but Harstem recognizes he has lost too much to recover. Was that necessarily the case? Maybe. That was a maybe right there. That was a maybe. Technically, you could have tried using that bank of yours to come back, but he figured it was far too poor of an engagement and far too close to his own home as well. He was pushing from his 4th and 5th base into ShowTimE's 5th base. So if he was going to lose that army fight as badly as he did, then he was just going to quickly lose his economy as well. So yeah, he had a bank. Yeah, he could have tried replacing a gateway-based army. Disruptors would have taken forever to replace. The gateway army would have taken 2 or 3 gateway cycles to replace, right? So he did have to tap out. That was just such a bad fight. It was an extremely poor fight, because there's lots of examples in PvP where one disruptor shot looks amazing, but the rest of the fight's fine. That was an example of one disruptor shot looking fantastic and the rest of the fight looking great for ShowTimE too. So Harstem has to tap out of that one. Too bad, because I think both of them are getting quite well set up for a very long and engaged PvP. And then Harstem just overstepped his boundaries. I mean, he had such a cool idea. The 10 DTs jumping on the Disruptors, which are on the front lines. I mean, he did take down like 3 of them. You know, that's pretty good to start an engagement off. But then he just didn't have the ability to micro away from the one Disruptor shot that connected. That was a strike right there. So we didn't get to see the late game, super late game PvP. We might see it here in Romanticide. Another very large macro map in the sense of left to right anyways. In the top left, as the red Protoss, we have ShowTimE. And in the bottom right, it is the blue Protoss, Harstem. Harstem is going to try and go for a low ground wall off, similar to what he did against Christianer. Didn't want to play that Void Ray Immortal style just directly after playing it, I guess, last game. He could have. It was Death Aura. Instead went for a Proxy Robo. Maybe was hoping that ShowTimE was looking at that last PvP and was totally going to be blindsided by the Proxy Robo. I could actually see that being, you know, Harstem's plan there, because ShowTimE was just waiting for that PvP to end. So it's very possible he was watching it. But it didn't work. So that game did, of course, start off a bit awkwardly for Harstem with the quote-unquote failed proxy. It was just one of those weird cheeses, though, that like it doesn't kill your opponent. So in that way, it's a fail, but it kept both of you on one base, so it's actually recoverable. And I think Harstem was well on his way to even being ahead in that game. His 5th base was later, but he was taking some okay trades. His bank was quite large, and they were both on 5 bases. Like Harstem's was finishing when that engagement happened. They both were on their way to Stargates. They both had plenty of SAG defense and tech options aplenty. Like it could have continued on. It really was just because of one very bad fight that sometimes can happen. I would say kind of rare though. I know everyone loves to complain about disruptors. And it's so funny too when, like, you know, one disruptor shot works and everyone's like, disruptors are so dumb, I hate them, they're the worst. And then the next game, a disruptor doesn't do shit. And they're like, lol, disruptors. Duality of Twitch chat. Anyways, I would say that in PvP and those types of games, it is very rarely because of one fight that the game ends. Like, we've seen a lot of very beautiful PvPs, especially on a map like Romanticide, where a couple of disruptor shots hit. They are a little bit painful, but the game goes on. And there's multiple fights happening. Multiple fights. 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. I'd love to see that happen here and not just end with one catastrophic engagement. Once again, Harstem has to deal with a blocked natural, but this time ShowTimE not only blocking with the pylon, but also the 7X core even lets it finish, so a bit different from Christianer. ShowTimE is not too eager to go into a Nexus. He's actually going to go for a third gateway and try to bust Harstem's natural, so a very different approach than Christianer. Third gateway in the back. Harstem has not gotten a lot of scouting yet. Oh no, he did actually. Oh no, a Protoss has just died. Oh geez, oh lord. Okay, well Harstem has fantastic scouting, so ShowTimE, he could have canceled the gateway, I guess. But I could also see him just being like, it's not really worth it. But that would have been a slightly faster Nexus. His Nexus already not that much far behind his opponent. I definitely think you don't do the 3 gateway attack now that it's been scouted. But I do wonder if you cancel it. Oh well. Oh well. Oracle's going to swoop on by. There are already Stalkers available, so not a big deal with a single Oracle. And then a Void Ray has been made. And that Void Ray to me shouts that Harstem is going to play like he did on Death Aura in the previous PvP series. He's going to play Void Ray Immortal, but oh my god! Oh my god! I thought that was a very fat probe, but it has a pylon. Oh no! Oh my goodness! Oh, no wonder he also was tempted to go for 3 gateways. 2 Adepts killing 5 probes already. Yeah, maybe would have liked a couple more just because they're not just 2 Adepts, but they were also hidden. Well, there you go. Get 6, I think would be great. Oh, yeah, he's gonna get a 6. He might get a 7th. Nah, Shield Batter's gonna save it. All right, 6 is pretty good. 6 is pretty damn good here. 5 was already good, to be clear, but I was saying because it was hidden, because it was a pylon on the main, maybe it could have gotten even more, you know? It must have been such a shock to Harstem. Like, what the hell? Figuring it out about as quick as you can, though, pulling his probes away, going back to kill the pylon, but you know, 6 being killed, very good for ShowTimE. He took the opportunity. It doesn't happen too often in these pro series, but Romanticide certainly does have a lot of dead space. And you don't usually want to put your pylon over there to scout until the very later stages of the game because you want your pylons in a nice protected area. They're powering all your important structures, so you don't see those scouting pylons until the, 8th or 9th or even 10th. And even then, you might not want to put it down because a Warp Prism with Immortals could kill it, like last game. Not that this game's going to be about Warp Prisms and Immortals. No. Last game, it went into it because of the way it opened, because of Harstem's Proxy Robo. This game, ShowTimE going right into Blink, +1, 3rd Nexus, and Harstem going into continued Void Ray production, no Twilight Council, just into a Robo. I really like what ShowTime's doing, though. I think ShowTime has already gotten a great start to this game. I love the idea of the proxy, but it is going to be found out by Harstem. It's actually quite fortunate for Harstem. ShowTime is still, he could bring another probe out and try and do it again, but is in a position where he could attack as well as macro quite well. And I think Harstem would have had a lot of trouble defending it. Now, with a huge delay on the engagements, gives a lot more time for ShowTime, for Harstem to set up a defense. And not only set up a defense, but also, know that he has to set up a defense. Be like, oh, well, clearly you're going to try to attack me. You just tried to proxy a gateway. You already are going to be playing, very defensive with this style. You're already going to be prepared to throw down a bunch of shield batteries, but it's always great to have the knowledge, and he's going to get further knowledge. ShowTime did try and throw down another gateway, and he scouted it. The stasis traps are beautiful for Harstem in previous games. Let's see if ShowTime does a better job identifying them and dealing with them. ShowTime gets his proxy up and is moving his army out now, but is also grabbing that 4th Nex, is also grabbing his upgrades, including Charge, including his own Robo. He is moving on as well as preparing for potential engagement, potential harassment, really. Harstem going out to bop that, yeah, I was going to say, is a little too dangerous, I think. Maybe he was checking for an even, further advanced pylon. Or maybe a Warp Prism to get ahead of the army or something like that, but he definitely should be using high ground and stasis traps and shield batteries to protect his still kind of vulnerable army. I mean, it sounds powerful. You say Void Ray Immortal, and you think, wow, no way the Stalkers can break that. But if you're talking about 3 Void Rays out in the middle of the map and 2 Immortals. It's a very different story. The Stalkers actually win that one. ShowTime gonna add on a single observer. I wouldn't even mind a single observer just to bring around with his main army. But I think that Robo is really just an observer making machine. Wants to be able to find some avenue of attack into Harstem's base, but Romanticide with that high ground 3 base setup. Doesn't take very long for the army to respond to the left and to the right. Harstem, oh, this is interesting. Not just adding on disruptors, which we expected, and a fleet beacon, which we expected, but also adding on blink. I wouldn't have thought he would do that. I could see charge, but all right. Excellent control so far from ShowTime. Takes out an Immortal and blinks successfully away from the single disruptor that is available. But Harstem's 3 Void Rays aren't that scary. He is going to be quickly up into 5 and then 7. Very good eyes there from ShowTime, recognizing what Harstem was trying to do. Blinks 1 Stalker forward to pop that stasis trap. That is no more stasis traps for Blue Protoss. Something he was relying on last time he was up against an aggressive Blink Stalker player. Only 1 Stalker going down to the Disruptor is not actually good use of the AoE. Another Immortal looking to be target fired, but a shield battery is just way too strong when it's overcharged, and then ShowTime just says, you know what, yeah, go ahead, have it. Gonna wait for it to disappear and then come back in. But Harstem, I mean, he can use that time of the overcharged shield battery very well. If that means another disruptor or another 2 Void Rays, that is excellent. But ooh, one-shotting Void Rays, one-shotting disruptors. ShowTime, again, showing some excellent control right here. Also gonna get some charge outs into the natural. Decides not to. I think he was hoping for a little bit more of a chase. Chase me, pretty boy. But Harstem didn't fall for it. I think eventually, though, like, sending these Zealots in, regardless of where Harstem's army is or isn't, I think is actually going to still be a good idea. That's what ShowTime's thinking as well. He's going to take care of 1 Void Ray, get about half off the other side, the other Void Ray. Zealots come in. I think even using them to try and clear up some SAG defense would not be a bad idea whatsoever. ShowTime now reinforcing the Zealots without further Zealots, but also Stalkers. Going for a bit of a pincer here, perhaps. You could find the Disruptors trying to stay safe behind the army. You could find the SAG defense. Ooh, Disruptors. Ooh, a beautiful shot right there. Killing a good 8 Zealots. Isn't exactly the most important part of ShowTime's army to take care of, but I'd say that was very worthwhile. The first carrier is on the way, but ShowTime has truly taken the map. He's already up to 5 bases. Could easily grab a 6th. Right now, it's all about him grabbing enough gases to afford what he's doing. He is going to also prepare for a transition. So he's finishing up his 3rd gateway. He's finishing up more gateways. His 3rd upgrade, sorry. He's finishing up more gateways. But he's also grabbing a Stargate. Harstem's been okay on 3 bases up until basically now. Until basically 12 minutes actually would be my guess as to when it's okay. But after 12 minutes... in Legacy of the Void, you gotta reach towards a 4th base, especially if you're affording very, very expensive units like carriers. And if you're losing them, that's also a very big deal. Now, so far, Harstem's retention of his units has not been terrible, but it's definitely not been as good as it has been in the past. Now, the Disruptor taking out a handful of Zealots, but losing 2 Voiders on the front lines. I think that actually went okay, because he did take a lot of Stalkers down with him. Let's actually check the units lost, so... yeah, that's a lot of 1s right there. 1 Immortal, 1 Adept, 1 Stalker, 1 Disruptor. 4 Void Rays, there you go. But that's good. That's okay for Harstem. It's now 12 minutes and he's still nowhere close to getting a 4th. No matter... you'd have to be very, very good about keeping units alive to be okay with that. Which, you know, Harstem's getting there, man. You can max out on 3 bases. You can technically max out on 2, I guess, if you really don't take any engagements, but... It's supposed to be difficult. ShowTime pushing in again, grabbing another Void Ray, but it's no longer about the Void Rays. It's about the carriers staying alive, but the Disruptor's getting some shots, and for Harstem, he invested into that Blink, which I noted earlier, now has a lot of his own Stalkers. So he can even punish ShowTime for trying to blink away if he's gonna split up his army like this. ShowTime splitting up his army quite well and microing both sides quite well, but there's the aggressive blink forward from Harstem I was talking about. Trying to punish ShowTime a little bit more. Doesn't find anything, though. Harstem finally making headway to get his 4th base, but here comes the might of ShowTime's full army, potentially looking for a concave, and this might be a little bit too much of a far-reaching army for Harstem. I don't think he can actually grab this Nexus. ShowTime takes full advantage of this, jumps on top of the army, tries to split away from the disruptors. That's not going to be good enough, but he takes down 2 of the carriers, he takes down another disruptor, and he blinks the heck out of there. Ooh, that was a scary moment right there for Harstem. But fortunately, his ground army, his stalker count also wasn't too poor. He's going to overreach perhaps once again, though I don't know about this. 2 disruptors going down, another carrier going down, a 3rd disruptor shot from way too far away and does not contribute to the fight. Harstem might still be able to win out. No, another disruptor does not hit as ShowTime aggressively blinks forward. He wants to go for that last carrier. He's not going to find it. Harstem is still left with a lot of his own blink stalkers. No, he does find it. Ooh, to the right side, ShowTime also reinforcing. Harstem, I don't think is going to be able to grab this 4th Nexus, and in the attempt to grab the 4th, he has lost everything he has worked towards. He wanted to get to the mass carrier army, and now he is set back to 0 carriers. ShowTime with some really good micro, good decision-making. He almost looks like he would intentionally trap Harstem into the idea that he could grab a 4th Nexus. I'm really surprised he went for that 4th Nexus, too. I mean, that was such a beautiful opportunity for ShowTime. I want to give credit to ShowTime first and then critique Harstem after, but I am surprised that Harstem reached towards that 4th base in particular. I thought he was going to try and get this one. Now, this 4th base, it covers your entry into the rest of your bases, so I get the idea of wanting this base, absolutely. But then there's a very wide concave, and that's been a problem on Ramana side for any race in any matchup. Where this one at least would have been a choke, so... well... Maybe if he had stronger stalkers, maybe if he had a couple more immortals in his army, actually, instead of the disruptors, where most of them didn't really get great hits, then I think that actually is maybe a poor idea from ShowTime to do what he did. Imagine if instead of 3 disruptors not really getting a whole lot, because really only 1 got a great shot, there was 3 more immortals. Like, what happens then when the stalkers blink aggressively forward? I don't know. But it is what it is, and ShowTime was always going to have a superior economy, a superior bank, a superior reinforcement, so that was always going to be the case. Harstem was always depending on just a very, very, very good engagement, which he did not get. He got an okay one. They technically traded out, but he traded out with more expensive slow-building units and with a far weaker economy. ShowTime, remaxes, feels like almost instantly. Still micring. Even feels, he's not even going to try and blink on top of anything important. He's just taking out the interceptors. ShowTime did out on his own Stargate, but never bothered going into a fleet beat, and he saw the open opportunity and went for it, and now he just thinks he can carry with the momentum to win, which I don't think he's necessarily wrong. But despite Harstem losing his carriers and losing his 4th Nexus 1, 2, 3 times, he's canceled it multiple times, he still has managed to recoup a little bit of his losses. Like, he has up to 5 carriers again. His stalker count stayed pretty even throughout the last couple of minutes, but he no longer has any unit that really shouts comeback. He lost all of his disruptors and only is now replacing one of them. He's going to lose his 3rd Nexus. The overcharged shieldbetter tries to save it, but it's a little bit too late, and he can't even really get a good punish. Oh no, just kidding, yes he can! Oh my god, the disruptors from the left side! Oh, apparently he did rebuild his disruptors. I just had no idea where they were. Okay, so he got a little bit of a punish right there for his Nexus dying, but again, not enough. ShowTime has been on 90 plus workers for the last like 7 minutes, guys. And 96 right now on 7 bases. Using this point as a reinforcement point this entire time, too, which I haven't really highlighted, but that's going to be kind of a cool thing. He hasn't had to depend on a warp prism, which could have gotten shot down by anything. He jumps on top of the carriers, and that is it for Harstem. ShowTime, fabulous in PvP. Fabulous. Takes care of this style, makes it look easy.